Largely recognized as the most notorious prison in the world, Alcatraz has been enshrined in popular culture. In the mind of many, this prison island is synonymous with myths and legends, but no one knows its full story. And many of its mysteries go far deeper than the famous escape attempt, which leaves us with some questions. Our first legend comes from various native cultures in the area. Alcatraz was not always a prison island. It became a federal prison in 1934. It had previously been used as a military prison from the American Civil War up until then. Alcatraz was first documented by Europeans in 1775, but Native Americans had known about the island for a long time before that. Many native tribes believed the island was occupied by a group of humanoid creatures covered in feathers. They would avoid venturing to the island for fear that the creatures would steal their souls. The creatures were said to have only had one arm, their right arm, and in the place of their left arm was a large wing. They were sort of like a mix between humans and eagles. They survived by eating anything that approaches the island, whether it be a mouse or a human. Alcatraz Island was known to have been a nesting spot for pelican, so maybe the natives just hallucinated while seeing them. It is part of some native cultures to take strong hallucinogenics. The next legend is that the local police force set fire to the building. The prison was closed in 1963, and in 1969 it was taken over by a group of 79 Native Americans. It was basically a publicity stunt to gain more attention for Native issues. State officials were unable to remove the group as public opinion seemed to be in favor of their cause. They stayed there for 19 months before a huge fire broke out. It destroyed part of the building, which turned public opinion against the group. They were then evicted by authorities. The natives claimed the fire was started by a group of white people who landed on the island that night. The legend is that the police needed an excuse to evict the group, so they started the fire in secret. There is a legend that inside Alcatraz, the acoustics of the building alone were enough to drive a person insane. In the early years of being a federal prison, a policy of silence was strictly enforced. No noise would be tolerated, and if you're wondering how they were allowed to do that, it was in the 1930s. Inmates begged the guards to end the silence, declaring it to be the worst kind of torture. But they were ignored. In 1937, a prisoner named Ruth Percival, who was permitted to work with tools, attempted to cut off his own hands with a hatchet. He managed to remove the fingers from one hand. It was never proven that this behavior was caused by the silence. Alcatraz Island is seen by many as one of North America's most haunted places. Paranormal activity has been reported by both prisoners and guards, and later by visitors. They describe hearing voices whispering from the cell walls, the sound of violin music, or machinery that hasn't been in the prison for over 50 years. Officials deny any validity to these claims. When Mark Twain visited the island, he wrote of it being as cold as winter, even in the summer months. And E. Floyd once said that almost every guard and official who served there experienced something out of the ordinary. The most common encounter people report is the sighting of dark phantom-like figures walking the corridors. These visions are often accompanied by the sound of chains being dragged along the floor. They are said to be the spirits of Native Americans who were held in Alcatraz during its time as a military prison. In fact, a prison guard once reported seeing a group of native soldiers marching in a circle before suddenly disappearing. One inmate once reported seeing glowing red eyes floating in the darkness. The following morning he was found dead in his cell, with unrecognizable marks around his neck. There is a theory that the famous escape attempt of 1962 was actually a success. It was perhaps the most well-documented prison escape ever. On the 11th of June 1962, 3 men crawled through holes they had dug in their cell walls, entering an unused corridor. In their beds, they had left behind dummy heads crafted from soap and toilet paper. As they climbed onto the prison roof, guards were fooled by the dummy heads, and no alarm was raised. They climbed down the outside of the building and ran over to the DIY raft they had built. And on that raft, they floated away from Alcatraz. The authorities were unable to determine whether they made it safely to the shore or whether they simply drowned. They were assumed to have died. A relative of one of the escapees claims that after the escape she received a phone call from him, and many other of the relatives claim that the escape was a success, and that the men have lived free ever since.
The spoon proves mightier than the bars at supposedly escape-proof Alcatraz prison. 3 bank robbers serving long terms scratched their way through grills covering an air vent, climbed a drainage pipe, and disappeared from the forbidding rock in San Francisco Bay. It appears to be the first successful escape in the history of the maximum security prison, and the flight is attributed by Warden Olin Blackwell to the deteriorating condition of the prison, crumbling concrete and eroding metals, with $5 million needed for repairs. The men the walls couldn't hold are Frank Morris and John and Clarence Anglin. Authorities believe that Morris, who has a superior IQ, masterminded the escape. Ironically, the wanted posters offer only the nominal reward of $50 each for information leading to the arrest of the prisoners. They painstakingly fashioned dummies of plaster with hair of paintbrush bristles to stand in for them during cell check, while they covered an escape hole with a cardboard grill. All of this was within easy visual range of the guards in the gun galleries. They climbed drain pipes to the top of the cell block and then slid down vents to the ground. Again, all of this within sight of guards. The escape triggered the greatest manhunt in San Francisco's history, as agents of the FBI, Coast Guardsmen, Highway Patrol, sheriff's deputies, and local police join in the search. Whatever their fate, the 3 convicts have apparently accomplished a feat that many have tried with no success.